this is an interesting story, and here in the States, uh, we have some really interesting things going on as far as culture shifts uh, and and I believe probably in the next 10 years there'll be some things, some standards the government will make that we may or may not, as believers, agree with fully. And so just praying through, like, here's some people in the Bible that dealt with some of these things that, maybe we can learn some lessons from. And so, of course, Daniel's our go-to guy, right?
Yeah.
Uh, who, but before this story, he had already been a leader in Babylon, and was, used to tell the king when the hand was writing on the wall what that meant, which is a great story. And then when another king, King Darius, came on the scene, he served him well. But it and and it's interesting because it seems like Daniel was not very well known, and he got to be real popular, and he wasn't very well known, and he got to be real popular. So every time there was a change of administration, people would come in like, "Oh, who's this guy?" kind of deal, and then he would kind of rise to the top, right? Uh, and so just before this story, it seems like there were some administrators and high officials that they're just like, dude, this dude is killing us. I mean, he's just killing us. Uh, and they got jealous, and so they went to King Darius and they said, "Oh, King, man, you rock. What if, we've been talking about it, we want to honor you. So what about we make a law, and for just 30 days, nobody's allowed to worship anybody but you. No gods, no other, nobody else, just you. Not Justin Bieber, only you." And and the king was like, "Wow, man, really? Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I wouldn't do that myself, but oh well, okay." And so they passed this law, and he signed it. Well, there was a rule among the Medes and the Persians who took over the Babylonian Empire, that once a law had been signed by the king, there wasn't any changing it. So, as like the minute the law was signed, it seems, Daniel made it a point of going up in his room, opening the door, and 3 times a day he prayed like he always did to the Lord his God. And so and these officials, like, they had a guy there with a camera, right? And so he didn't have a camera, but like, they were watching, they knew what was going to happen. I mean, they knew Daniel's character, and so as soon as this happened, they reported it to the king, and that's where our story starts. And if I'm struggling with saying story starts, that is not a good precursor for the actual story itself. Uh, so So when the king heard these words, he was really upset with himself. And so he spent the whole day until the sun went down trying to figure out some way to deliver Daniel. Well, then these administrators and high officials, they came to King Darius, and they said, "Oh, King Darius, your majesty, that once a law of the Medes and Persians has been signed by the king. It can't be changed." So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and they threw him into the lion's den. And the king cried out, "May your God, whom you continually serve, rescue you." And then they placed a huge stone over the lion's den, and the king took his signet ring and sealed that stone, and the other nobles who were there did the same thing. Then the king went back to the palace, and he fasted. He didn't have any entertainment brought to him that night, and he didn't sleep at all. And so as soon as the sun came up, man, he hurried to the lion's den. And when he reached the den, he cried out in anguish, Daniel, servant of the living God, has the God whom you continually serve been able to rescue you? Then Daniel spoke to the king and said, May the king live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found innocent before God, my king, and I have also been found innocent as far as anything against you. And so the king was overjoyed. And when they brought Daniel up out of the lion's den, he was unharmed because he trusted in his God. There's our story from God's word. So not an easy story per se, right? But once you kind of get the flow of it and you see it in your head, it's a lot easier to remember. So when the king heard these words, he was really what?
Stressed.
Yeah, he was upset. But with whom?
Himself.
Yeah, he was upset with himself. And he set his heart on delivering Daniel, and he worked until when? Do you remember?
Sundown.
Yeah, until the sun went down, trying to deliver him. And the administrators and the high officials, they came to him and said, Darius, our majesty, you know something.
Yeah, you got to follow this law.
Yeah, you know that once a law is signed by the king, according to the Medes and Persians, what?
Cannot be changed.
Yeah, it can't be changed. And so Darius was like, all right. And where did he send Daniel?
To the lion's den.
Yeah, they brought Daniel Lion's Den and they
Threw him there.
threw him in. And King Darius said to Daniel, that's what you get, man, when you break the law.
No.
No? That wasn't.
I don't know. Could you say that again? It might be right.
So he said, may the God
You serve.
Continually
Continually
serve.
serve.
continually serve. That's repeated twice in this story, by the way. May he rescue you. That's one of those little memory hooks that I use when I'm trying to get a story down really pat. And so then what did they do?
They put a stone
Put a
Yeah, they
stone
put a
on
stone
top.
over the mouth of the lion's den and
and sealed it with the
Sealed it with
king.
this ring.
yeah, with the signet ring and
Those
And all the
other
other people too.
nobles did
The
theirs.
nobles.
yeah, the other nobles did their signet ring as well. And then where did King Darius go?
To his home.
Palace.
Yeah, he went to the palace and he didn't.
He didn't have
King.
He didn't sleep.
didn't
He
eat and
didn't
didn't
have
entertain.
entertainment.
Yeah, he didn't eat and he had no entertainment brought to him, and
He didn't
He
sleep.
didn't sleep.
yeah, he didn't sleep. And so as soon as
As
the sun came up,
he ran to the lion's den.
yeah, he hurried to the lion's den and he cried out, not just cried out, but he cried out,
With a loud voice.
yeah, in a loud voice, but emotionally,
Angustia.
Anguish.
yeah, in anguish. Yeah, very good, Vivian. Yeah, he cried out in anguish. Daniel, servant
Of the
Of
most
the
high.
living God,
of the living God, has the God whom you
Sir.
Continually,
Continuously.
sir.
continually serve been able to rescue you? And Daniel spoke with the king, and the way he answers is interesting.
Long live the king.
Yeah, may the king
Live forever.
Yeah, may the king live forever. I mean, he's in the lion's den and he's sucking up. That would be what our culture would say, right? But he's showing respect to the king. And he said, my God,
You shut the lion's mouth.
Sent
he
an
sent
angel.
somebody to do it. Yeah, he sent angels
To close the lion's
That's
mouth.
the lion's mouth.
shut the mouths of the lions, and they
No harm.
They know harm.
Yeah. haven't harmed me because I was found
Innocent.
innocent before him, O my king, and also,
For you.
before you. I have not done harm. And so the king was like,
Yes.
yeah, the king was overjoyed. And he had Daniel brought out of the lion's den. And
And he was.
You didn't have any.
Mhm.
yeah, he was unharmed
harm.
because
He trusted in God.
he trusted. It's interesting the way it says it. He trusted in his God.
He trusted in his
So kind of an interesting little take here, right?
Mhm.
So, man, before we get to the king, we have a tendency when we look at Bible characters to make them like superheroes. Like, oh, Clark Kent doesn't have to worry about getting shot with a gun because he knows the bullet's going to bounce off, right? But what do you think it might have been like for Daniel emotionally when he knew he was we probably knew he was being set up, and yet he was still not just praying to God, but opening the doors and letting people see him pray. I mean, what might have been some emotional struggles he was having with that?
It's interesting if he knows that this is specifically targeted at him, then it might be different because he might just say, all right, we're going to have this showdown at some point. So
Okay.
it might as well be this.
Yeah. Get her done. Okay. Yeah.
You probably wanted to provoke the noble man and
Oh,
all of the other people to anger.
wow. Maybe trying to provoke them. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, let us come to a head.
Mhm.
Anybody else?
If it's for him, if this is targeted at him, maybe Daniel wants to do this openly
Mhm.
so that nobody else will be subject to this. Right? Because any number of people could decide to rat on their neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, because we know there's
They've got different gods, and the king is kind of low on the scale of usefulness as a god. Let's face it.
yeah,
Um,
and we know there's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? So there's at least three other guys who are worshiping the God of Israel at this time. Yeah, Cheryl.
Maybe it was his way of just throwing himself in the mercies of God and saying, God, the only one that can do something about this is you, and I'm just gonna serve you even more and
Yeah.
Trust you.
All right. Now I want to talk to our Christian audience here, all our Christian participants, because I'm a guy that doesn't have faith. I've never walked with God. You're telling me I'm going to do this and they're going to feed me to lions? I mean, even though I might be faithful to do this, I'm going to be scared to death because Nobody wants to be eaten by a lion. I mean, that's just not a, not that there's a fun way to go, but
I don't know that we know lions are the thing.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I probably should have put that in the introduction. That was part of that if anybody breaks this law, they're going to be thrown into the lion's den. So.
Oh, the punishment, right?
Yeah. I mean, this was not like hey, what are we going to do? Okay, let's come up with this. But the reality is, I mean, even though he was being faithful, I can still imagine there had to be fear involved.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, regardless of how much faith you have, there's still going to be that fear factor there. Well, let's look at the first part of this story. So when King Darius heard these words, he was really upset with himself. And he set his heart on delivering Daniel, and he worked until the sun went down, trying to find some way to deliver it. And then the administrators and the high officials came to him and said, Your Majesty, that once the law of the Medes and the Persians has been signed by the king, there's just no way to change it. And so the king ordered that they brought Daniel and they threw him into the lion's den. And King Darius said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you continually serve, rescue you." And a stone was bought and placed over the lion's den, and the king sealed it with his signet ring, and the other nobles who were there put their signets in the seal. And then the king, so that nothing could be done to change what was happening to Daniel. And the king went back to the palace, and he fasted. He had no entertainment brought to him, and he didn't sleep at all that night. So there's our first part of the story. I find it interesting. So, what's his position? He's
the king.
He's the king, and when he hears that Daniel is the one that's been praying, I mean, does it seem like he kind of realizes he's been tricked? I mean, do you get that sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it says, who's he upset with?
Himself.
Huh. What might we learn about the king that it's himself he's upset? Like, could he have been upset with anybody else?
Mhm.
Like who?
Those low lives that appeal to his vanity.
Yeah.
The ones that deceived him.
Yeah. Because they deceived him. Huh. But he's not upset with them. He's upset with himself. What might we learn about the king from the fact he's upset with himself? Yeah, Johnny.
He had the greatest authority over everybody, so he could easily have said no, and not, but like he decided to sign that petition. He regretted what he did.
Okay. All right. What were they appealing to when they were trying to get him to sign that law?
Vanity.
Pride comes before the fall.
I read that somewhere. Yeah. So what might he be upset about himself? I mean, what? So he's upset with himself. So what does that tell us about him?
He's got some self-awareness.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when something like that happens, at the time that you're doing the dumb thing, there's a little bell that says, dumb thing. But then you just talk right over it. And that's the ones that really make you come back and go, I can't believe I did that. I had the little dumb thing bell going off.
Yeah. Of course, I've never done that, but I've read about people
Yeah, yeah.
that have, you know, that have done that kind of thing.
I always think of it as, I remember about Proverbs and how it says wisdom cries out from the corners, from the places on the streets. And I always think, you know, wisdom was crying out to me and I didn't pay attention. Yeah.
Well, do we learn anything about his relationship, his respect for Daniel by the fact that he spent the rest of the day until the sun went down trying to figure out some way to deliver Daniel?
Yeah.
I think he's got maybe he also seems to have some respect for Daniel's God. That it's
Okay.
right for Daniel. It's not like this is a little quirky thing Daniel's got going. It's right for him to respect his God. And so it's not, it's worse than a trick. Daniel was doing a good thing. I think he recognizes that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And so also, we hate being tricked.
Oh man.
I
Yeah,
want to
That's
refer
the
to,
king, right?
yeah. It's kings, retired ESL instructors.
Which are pretty much the same level.
When it comes to that kind of thing, yes. Yeah. Like no, you're not going to get over on me. I got to talk to my plumber.
Yeah, Johnny, what
Yes. In the other kings before King Darius had respect for Daniel. So when the kings like started going down, they probably already have heard about Daniel and had respect toward him and knew that he was a good civilian and a good guy.
Well, you know, in the story, do we see whether the king knew Daniel or not? Do we see whether he had a relationship with him? Where do we see that?
We see that because when they wanted to accuse Daniel, he wanted to defend him. So he obviously knew who Daniel was. And he probably had a relationship with him. Or
Well,
else he wouldn't be defending him.
that's good. But is there anything we see in the story that we see that he had an ongoing relationship with Daniel?
Maybe because he knows that, at least he knows Daniel well enough to know Daniel continuously serve this God.
Yeah.
Yep.
Continue. May the God whom you continually serve.
Yes. Good job, Vivian. Thank you.
Yeah, he's got this. He knows him well enough to know his track record with God, right? So that's more than just a casual kind of relationship, right? So and these slimy guys, you know, I just every time I read the words of these guys, I just want to scrape my skin, you know. Yeah, Cheryl.
Oh, I just wanted to mention something about the king.
Yeah.
You know, it just kind of, I don't know, makes me angry at him because he's the king. And I thought the king like was in charge and could make laws and change laws and do whatever he wanted. So to me, it seems like he didn't really want to go out on a limb to say, you know, I don't really care. I'm the king. I'm in charge. And you were the ones that you know deceived me or whatever. I don't know. It just seems like he could have rescued Daniel, or he could have gone to Daniel and said,
Close that door, please, man.
because Daniel was such a wise person, right? He could have gone and said, Daniel, what should I do? I don't know.
That brings up a great question, Cheryl. What do we learn about Darius that he obeyed the law, even though he didn't want to? I mean, do you see cowardice here or do you see obedience? I'd be
I
interested.
don't know. I kind of see.
Well, not in a very good way, but we do see him being like honest and not being corrupt,
mm,
even
But-
though this time he should have been corrupt with the law.
But he is letting corruption be there, by not cracking down on these people that are accusing Daniel for he didn't do anything wrong. So it's like, I don't know, it seems like he's a people pleaser in a way. If he's,
Well, now remember in
want-
the introduction, we talked about the fact that in this empire, the law of the Medes and Persians, it was set in stone. Once a law is signed, doesn't matter who it is, it cannot be changed.
but who's higher than the king?
Well, in what does this tell us about this political system?
This is a system that's seeking to not cater to the whims of a king. They want to have a law that applies somewhat equally so that you can't just give your friends a pass or beat up on somebody for no reason. It's a good plan. And they knew this wasn't an overall good law, so it's kind of like a proclamation of honor that's just got a 30-day expiration on it.
Yeah.
Which is
So there's several kings in this.
Not king.
Medes and Persians?
Let's look at the system. So when they put the stone on the lion's den,
Mhm.
all right,
The other nobles.
if Darius was the only one who had authority, whose ring would have been the signet?
Just his.
So what might we learn about their system from the fact that these other nobles also put their signets? I mean, could that tell us anything about their governmental structure from the story?
well, it may be that you need witnesses when the king does certain things, so that one has authority. The king may have authority, but that authority has to be exercised in the presence of witnesses, so nobody can steal the king's.
Okay, yeah.
But it's a checks and balances kind of, whatever it is, it's got some kind of checks and balances. And it could be that you've got to have the authority of the others, or it could be to show consensus. It's not uncommon for things to have more than one sort of signature.
I guess the nobles, or the other higher, well, they're lower than the king, but I guess them as a group, if he does something against that, then they could dethrone him, right? Or kill him or something.
We're not told specifically, but it does seem like there's a little bit more parity among the Medes and the Persians than typically what we see in some other stories, what we have seen in other stories we have done, where, hey, I'm the king, I'm going to do what I caught big and wanted it.
Mhm.
Because does it seem like the king really, 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 really wants Daniel to be delivered?
Yeah, it does.
And so the fact that he can't figure out a way to deliver him, might that tell us something about their system?
It's got some checks and balances. It's also a system that's fairly complicated, because if it really was like, oh, there's nothing you can do ever, he wouldn't have spent his time trying to find the loophole.
Yeah.
Spending
Oh, that's good.
going and maybe looking at laws or consulting with people about exceptions. And in this instance, he can't find one, but apparently sometimes you can. Or why would you bother?
Yeah. Yeah, Cheryl.
Okay, one more comment. Yeah, I mean, he seems to love Daniel so much, right? But obviously he loves himself more. He loves being king more. I mean, he could just say, I don't care, you know, he's an innocent man and on my watch, you know. But I mean, and he could have said, and it's my fault. You can dethrone me or whatever you want to do, but we're not putting him, I'm not going to put my ring into a thing and have this innocent man be thrown in.
But
I
now,
don't know, just,
but if the law of the Medes and Persians cannot be changed by anybody,
Yeah.
okay? So he says that, gets dethroned. Does that change Daniel's situation in the least?
I
No.
guess not. All right, you can go on with the story.
But I think it's like it's I can imagine it's very complicated in any political system, even back in 1,000 years ago. Like even just now, I'm picturing West Wing, but like even in Rome, it's like there's a Roman and there's all the senator. There's always plotting around. Like if you do a little thing wrong, there's always calculation and strategy. So he might not be the smartest guy, and he got tricked, but then he's smart enough. He knows that people are always conspiring against him at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so what do we learn about Daniel from what he says when they arrest him and they get ready to throw him into the pit?
What did he say?
He doesn't say anything.
Who, Daniel?
Oh.
Oh.
Ah.
I mean, yeah, that's it. Yeah, I like that. Just, I do find that unusual.
Rule.
So yeah, Johnny.
Yes. He knew he was breaking the law, and he was willing to pay the consequence for it
Oh, right.
and not complain about it.
Hmm.
I'm going to complain about it. It's a stupid rule. I mean, there's one thing to live with the circumstances. It's another thing to, go down into the pit without having your say. But I'm just saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd at least want to share hey, okay, I did this. I honored God. You guys are still idiots. So, but he doesn't say any of that. But you know what the king said? May your God, the God whom you continually served, rescue you. So what might we learn about Darius and his relationship with the God of Daniel?
It was his God.
Oh.
He thinks that at a minimum, gods are capable of rescuing and would probably have favor on someone as faithful, right? That faithfulness ups the likelihood of you being rescued.
Well, so I like that he's your God, not my God, not our God, your God. And yet he goes to the palace, and what's he do?
He fast.
He fast.
Yeah, that's weird.
But do we know it was fasting only a Jewish thing?
Well, apparently not.
Or just no appetite. Like,
Yeah.
and sometimes you just like,
Said he didn't want to eat.
Mhm.
May not have entertained me either.
We don't know if he's like doing a religious kind of fasting, but I mean, with that kind of a problem, who would want to eat?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me add a little bit of flavor to the story, if that's okay.
Is it in the story? Your flavor?
Yes,
Your flavor in the story?
yes.
Okay. All right.
You know how King Darius had all the and all of the nobles were there when they put the stamp.
Yeah.
He maybe didn't want. He maybe was a believer in God, King Darius. Let me go on. Maybe King Darius was a believer in God, but since he didn't want to call God his God because he would be breaking the law, and maybe he didn't want to get put down to the into the lion's den, because that would mean that he would be having another God. So then that's why maybe he told Daniel, Daniel, may your God.
What do some of the rest of you think about that?
Well, you say if he's a believer, then he wouldn't have agreed to this law, to this decree to begin with.
Hmm.
That's-
And it didn't say you couldn't have a God
Just said you
other than
can't-
the king. All it said was you couldn't worship him publicly. Right? So having a God that was not going to get you thrown into the lion's den.
Could you have worshipped your God privately?
That's a good question, and I don't know that came, but nobody would have known, right?
Yeah.
If you worship God privately, there's nothing they can accuse you of.
Yeah.
But it
That's
just
true.
said
I think we know sleep. That's a kind of usually a private thing.
yeah.
So it seems like at least probably he shared with Daniel. And that's how, oh, last night I didn't eat anything. I didn't have any entertainments. I couldn't sleep. I'm so, so glad.
And we won't get there today, but in the second part of the story, if you remember, he also said, your God. So he repeats that twice. That, I mean, he's very specific, not our God, but your God. So, I mean, so the government passed a really stupid law.
Don't be switching to talking about the governor of Virginia. Just stay.
Oh, listen, I think when it comes to stupid laws, we have enough states that we could spend the rest of the time talking about the different dumb laws that people have come up with and are coming up with. Every time I think politicians couldn't get any dumber, they take it as a challenge. Every time I think our politicians here in America couldn't do anything dumber, they take that as a personal challenge. Here, hold
they
my
take it as a
beer while I
challenge.
pass another
Oh.
stupid law. But I mean, in this story, we see that the government passed a stupid law, and Daniel took a stand against that law, right? I mean, he was pretty public in that, but and yet he didn't speak out. We talked about that. He didn't, when they were taking him in, he's not like, this is dumb. I mean, today government still pass laws that we like, well, that's just dumb, right? What might we learn about Daniel that we can apply to our lives? And I'm changing the questions up here a little bit. When it comes to dealing with government, I mean, anything we could, yeah.
One thing I've been thinking through the whole story, he didn't really, other than like opening the doors, I guess. And I guess, do we know that was different? I don't know if do we not know that he did that anyway?
Yeah, that very well he could have done that anyway. We're not told.
Yeah, he just like you said, it was almost he could have very privately just kept worshiping God, but he really didn't change anything. He just kept doing what he knew was right. Like he didn't get
Mm.
real outspoken. So it's just like, I guess if you're asking what we could learn, what I could learn, it would be like to just keep doing the right thing. You know, you don't necessarily always have to take a huge stance. Sometimes your stance is just continually,
Yeah, yeah.
just like in the story. So
Anybody else? I mean, what do you see? I mean, because we all live in government systems that aren't perfect, right? I mean, that's this side of heaven. It's just the way it's going to work. Yeah, Cheryl.
I just think of the word honor,
Hmm.
honor God, and honor him above the government. And if it's going to honor him, for people to see you worship him or pray to him, or he was honoring God. And so I don't think being in, hiding your relationship with him is honoring him.
Yeah. Yeah, and we didn't talk about that a lot because it wasn't in the story per se, more in the introduction. But yeah, Mo.
yeah, real quick, guys. I also think it's interesting, like that. Like it's easy for me, my mind to go like this was against God, and it was, but it would have been like the law was against any God, which they don't exist. We know that, but like
Yeah.
if somebody was worshiping these other false gods, they would have got the same punishment. I guess I know they were targeting Daniel, but
Yeah.
it's like it's really like it wasn't really that he was worshiping the true God. It was that he wasn't. It's all slimy, but it was because he wasn't worshiping the king instead of that.
Right.
So it's easy. Yeah, I don't know. Hope that made sense.
Well, I kind of wanted to plant those seeds because this is one of those stories that's kind of a continuation. And so when we do the second part of the story next week, that's why I'm kind of fudging a little bit on my application here. Just want you to ponder that some, because I think there are some lessons that we're going to learn from Daniel that apply to any circumstance. I mean, Cheryl, you guys live in a country with a different, a different expression of government than what we have here in the United States. On Wednesdays, I'm doing stories in China on Wednesday mornings, and the people there love their government, and they respect their government. And let's face it, there are things, as a citizen of the United States, this is going on record, so they'll probably start my FBI file now. But our system's not perfect, and the communist system is not totally imperfect, right? There are positives to every system, and so
Alexa, that wasn't me.
yeah. Yeah, I've got I have all my Amazon stuff unplugged right now, so I can. But I just kind of this is one of those stories. I just really I thought we'd get farther, but that's good. That never upsets me. So I never get distraught by that, because that gives me another week to think through the story and meditate on it and ponder it. But so as you go through the week, review the story a little bit, review the history a little bit, and just kind of think to yourself, all right, if you've been on Facebook for longer than 15 seconds, you know where people's opinions are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have folks as friends on both sides of the aisle, because I try as a minister of the gospel, I've tried to be very neutral in anything I post on Facebook, as far as, most people don't know where I stand politically. And I'm very intentional about that, even though I have really hardcore beliefs, right? And there are so many times I'll see somebody post something, I'm going, okay, I just got to unfriend that dude. I mean, it's just, man, I mean, that is just, that's a whack job right there. He's a nutcase. But I'm like, nope. My job is not to agree with him politically. My job is to see what he's doing. So I am reminded by the Holy Spirit that I need to be praying for him more faithfully. Right. So this story is in Daniel chapter 6, verses 14 through 23, I think it is.
One thing I was thinking as you're moving into the application, how do I find that? And I don't get that involved in politics where it's happening, but I thought this cancel culture,
Oh,
I mean, these guys really wanted to cancel Daniel bad
yeah.
and did not choose something fair. They picked something that he would see as a virtue. And I feel like that happens all the time, that people will go at someone and try and make one of their things that they believe in strongly look bad.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? That's not an inherently bad thing. I might even think it's a good thing what the person is doing, but they jump right in or it's this relatively small thing or something, a long time ago. Oh my goodness. Dr. Seuss had anti-Asian stereotypes in the middle of World War II when Japan had attacked the United States. How could it be? It's not, filled with them is the more amazing thing, that he goes for elephants and sneetches instead. And so how do I approach this? It's sort of like in the Psalms, there's a lot of that Daniel going, and my enemies, and you're like, but you're king. But it was a difficult circumstance when he comes in with the previous dynasty wiped out in a battle, and him being the a lesser son, and so David lives with that his whole kingship of I've got exterior enemies, and inside I've got people that are always looking for me to fail.
Yeah.
And
Oh, wait, you have your mask on then? So, all right. Well, thank you guys. And next week we'll dig into the second part of this a little bit. So there's some fun stuff here. You might want to read on ahead a couple of verses, because we see the recompense for the
Bad guys.
Slimy people.
for the slime balls. They do not get away scot-free, let's say.
yeah, that's why Vivian and I had to show you the fierce animals that live in their houses.
Yeah, I was going, man, I feel, I need to have my granddaughter come over and sit in my lap.
They get thrown into the dam.
So
They heard this